we're gonna get started here. We've got two talks. The first one, well, first of all, say hi.
Me?
Yeah, sorry.
Hey guys,
Say your
I'm
name.
Eli
Say
Silverman.
hi. There you go.
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles. Been a member of this meetup for a couple of years. First talk. Long time listener, first time caller.
There we go. Yeah. So sorry, one second. I'm admitting people in the room. So sorry. Let's give it another minute. People are still trickling in. I don't want to keep getting cut off.
Cool.
In fact, I don't have a mini side conversation here for a sec. James, you're ready to go too?
Where am I going?
I think you're giving the second talk, are you not? I hope.
No, I will be.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Sure. We didn't check in ahead of time, just wanted to make sure.
Cool.
James, are you in a fake cafe?
I'm in a fake something. Yes.
Fake co-working space? That's pretty cool.
That's how WeWork is kind of finally going to get financially profitable. They're going to sell stock photography for the background for James's video. All right.
Let me know when you.
Yeah. One more time. So we have two talks here. Eli is going to kick it off. As I will let him explain his app, but I do want to say that I got a chance to take a look at it ahead of time, and it's pretty dope. It's really beautiful. He just really built something very cool in a shockingly nice in a very short amount of time. So it was very, very cool. So looking forward to hearing about the talk and how he thought that through and how he built it. And then James is also working on like a project, like a conceptual marketplace idea. And I will let him speak to that as well. Anyway, I will pause myself now and let him start off.
Cool. Thanks for the intro, Code. I appreciate the comments. So I'm going to be in an app I built at the beginning of the pandemic. I've been working in the food industry for about 13 years, partially as a chef and cook and partially as a consultant graphic designer. And so when the pandemic hit, I put my skills to use to try to create a bridge for an industry that was kind of in free fall. So I'm just going to go ahead without further ado and start a slideshow for y'all. So let me know if it's working. I've never been a Zoom host before. It's a real honor, I gotta say. All right. Cool. So, yeah, this is gonna be a talk about how I built a free food ordering app with Vue.js, Airtable, and Netlify. I'm going to go into some of the technical details, but it's going to be mostly an overview of the logic and the process behind it, and how I made some design decisions and product decisions. And I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards or later regarding the technical implementation of any of this stuff. So I built something called Minimart. It's a free way for independent food businesses to receive and fulfill orders online. I'm just going to read the slide. And avoid fees for credit cards, food couriers, and website hosting. This is a little screenshot of what it looks like to order, and I'll show you that in a little bit live. Okay, so my background, like I said, I've been a creative consultant, graphic designer, and web dev for restaurants for a long time. I used to be a cook. About 3 years ago, I started building a startup called Resto, which is all about it's like a website builder just for restaurants that really focuses on elegant and easy to make changes to the menus. The goal is to have printable menus that are printable directly from the website so that there's continuity and synchronicity, kind of have like one source of truth for the menu on the restaurant website, and then have that propagate to any point where a guest interacts with it, whether that's in print, in digital display, like a TV in store, through like these resource directory gatekeepers like Facebook, Yelp, Google, all that stuff. So trying to streamline that whole workflow with the website being the cornerstone of that whole entity. And actually, one of my friends who's on the call right now is a business owner who owns a pizzeria in New Orleans, and they actually use the technology that I created prior to all this about 8 years ago. There's a not even a beta version, but an alpha version that they've been using for a while. And I lived in New Orleans for a decade, which means a lot of my customer base is still there, though I am expanding into LA. Minimart has been a really great opportunity for me to expand through this word of mouth connections. And because it's a volunteer project and it's completely free, people are more willing to take a risk and try out the product. So it's really been fostering a deeper sense of community for me as a professional here in the city, which is awesome. And I cut my own hair twice, which I think is really cool. It's hard, but not as hard as straight hair, I guess, because curly hair is kind of forgiving. Anyway, I'll do another talk on that later. So the way that I found this need for Minimart as a product was threefold. So I met someone on Hinge who I started seeing, and this person is a chef and private caterer. And when the pandemic hit, she decided that she wanted to start providing a meal service for her immunocompromised friends. So she was going to do deliveries basically directly from the farms that she's been working with for years, package those goods, put them in her car, and deliver them to customers, or do some like meal prep and deliver that as well as a secondary option. So basically groceries and meal delivery service. When we met, I think it's kind of like this modern rom-com, like girl meets boy, boy builds app kind of situation. I decided that I asked her, what are you using to take your orders for this business that you're building? She was using some spreadsheets, and they were well constructed, but they're spreadsheets and really don't get the job done in terms of creating a seamless workflow and dynamic communication between customer and shop owner. So I decided that as a romantic gesture, I would build her an app in a long weekend. This is also around the same time that I've had a call with a former client of mine who is dreaming about doing self-service delivery. Delivery fees for courier services like Uber Eats, Seamless, Chow Now, all these things, they can be anywhere from like 10 to 30% of the cost of the product for the restaurant. And that's an enormous margin considering how slim the margins are for restaurants in general. So this client of mine was saying, wouldn't it be great if we had like a DIY version of this that we could do ourselves? We could still offer delivery as an option, but not have to pay exorbitant fees. So in this moment where we really need revenue, we don't give it away to these somewhat predatory big tech companies. So between that conversation and my romantic gesture of building an app for this person that I was really into, Minimart was born. It was very clear to me that there was a bigger need than just these two individuals that I talked to, and that there was an opportunity to use a little bit of technology to save a lot of money. Another major component of this that I'm forgetting to say is that in addition to the courier fees, credit card fees are often eating I think a lot of us as web developers know, or even business owners know, that 2.9% is often like the fee that shops get hit with for the credit card processing. And there are a lot of independent food businesses that were spinning up around when quarantine started, whether they were pastry chefs who lost their job and were baking bread just to make ends meet, or there are restaurants that were turning into grocery stores to provide neighborhoods with needed pantry items and stuff. And because, again, the restaurant industry was in a free fall, I thought, why don't we do this in a way where we can leverage something like Venmo or Cash App and have like cash transactions where we're saving that credit card fee. So this is a volunteer effort that I basically thought, I'm going to just spend a little bit of time and try to mitigate the amount of fees that the restaurants get hit with. I don't have the chat window open, so let me know if you guys have any questions. Let me see.
And to be clear on that last point, you didn't build a payment system. This is just so they can take credit cards themselves or cash.
Yeah, so the idea was that it's all in service of having the most rapid prototypable thing that I could spit out. So that means really just organizing, like building a menu online, allowing customers to place an order on there, and then allowing the business owner to, in an organized fashion, see all the tickets that they need to put out for whatever day it was ordered on. Just like a really simple shopping cart experience, e-commerce experience. But without any of the bells and whistles, like Stripe integration or whatever a lot of like mature companies offer, but with the benefit of having what you'll see in a moment, a lot of organizational tools for workflow on the back end, and saving anywhere from 2.9% on the credit card fees to 30% if you're avoiding the courier fees and doing the delivery yourself, which a lot of my users ended up doing. Does that answer the question, Kobe?
Yep. I was looking for the mute button.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. So when I started ideating this project, I came up with some goals. Order form simplicity. The person that I built this app for, my Hinge date, we decided that something like a sushi menu is going to be a really good format where you just it's completely tabular. There aren't any photos. It's really simplistic text space. You have the item, the quantity, and the price. People add items to their shopping cart and check out. It's done. The next thing was the low friction guest user experience. I didn't want people to feel like, God damn it, I need to give my email to like another tech company. Like, can't this just be easy to, you know, I've been DMing this person on Instagram trying to buy loaves of bread or trying to buy, you know, cookies or whatever. Can I just do this in a way where I don't need to give my information to yet another tech company? So my idea was, let's just allow people to use their phone numbers. They can always, that'll be like their unique identifier from a data standpoint. And they can always, they don't have to remember passwords. They don't have to do anything like that. And obviously from a development standpoint, from a security standpoint, it is less secure, but there's not any sensitive data because we're not actually processing any transactions. So there's just a ledger of like what was sold and what needs to be delivered and stuff. So using that as a way to create a really low friction sign up experience and then usage experience was my goal. And then offering delivery and pickup fulfillment. These are basically the two different things that I heard from the people that I was working with in the very early days of the product, that these were the primary ways that they were selling to customers. And this is what should be the baseline of offerings. As I said before, all the decisions were made in service of immediacy, low cost, and rapid prototyping. So this is really one of those things where I'm the type of developer who's usually like, oh, let me try out 19 different libraries and see which one is like the best, or what's the bleeding edge thing that I just read in the Vue.js newsletter. But this is just like, I got to get this thing out the door. People are struggling right now. And it really allowed me to make those decisions, which I think is an interesting exercise for me. There is this note at the bottom. There's been a lot of generosity from a lot of big product providers in the tech space, mainly Netlify, Airtable, and Full Story have all been really generous in offering me premium support with their products. Without that, there would be a tremendous cost of, not tremendous in you know, the grand scheme of things, but for me as an individual who's giving my time, I'm not prepared to spend $1,500 a month to host this and have all the services. So that's been really, really important in terms of the success of this project.
If I may ask a little more on workflow, if you go back one, just talking about actually delivery from like a restaurant in general. So these are primarily kind of small restaurants, and they tend to do their own delivery. Is that how it works, or I mean, are they outsourcing it to like Uber Eats or something like that, or is it kind of just people ask them, hey, bring back a loaf of bread, like just so I understand kind of what the workflow is?
That's a good question. So the customer that I mentioned from New Orleans runs like a cafe, bakery, small restaurant. So they're doing like you know, hot food delivery and baked goods and coffee and stuff like that. But they're a well-established restaurant and they have a relationship with existing couriers. The person that I met on Hinge was doing this basically through DMs on Instagram. And that's really the community that I was trying to serve, like giving a stronger, more robust workflow and set of tools to these people who really have just ad hoc communication channels and workflows with their customers. And a lot of those people, they have cottage licenses, which is basically you can like cook out of your home and sell it. If you're not, there's certain stipulations around that, but it's very much like an informal market that I was trying to offer services for. Because
that's great.
Yes,
very cool.
It's interesting because Instagram actually started rolling out these commerce tools in like while I was getting this off the ground, and I think that they just released it as a beta to begin with, but like being able to transact on Instagram because so many users are constantly DMing for certain different types of sales. So they are obviously trying to capitalize on that. But again, I mean, I hate Facebook and Instagram, and this seems like a radical subversive act to create a free option that isn't going to continue to pigeonhole you into that construct and allow those people who have very informal businesses who, you know, I literally am working with a pastry chef who lost her job at like a really renowned restaurant. That restaurant's not continuing to do dine-in service, so there's no business. And so she's making really awesome bread right now. And she doesn't have an established, she doesn't have an LLC, she doesn't have like any of the formal business necessities, but she makes incredible food and she's selling it. And that's like, at this point, you know, who cares? I want that bread, you know?
She's a bread bootlegger.
Yeah, exactly. Does that answer the question?
Yep.
Cool. I'm not really going to cover Vuetify in this talk, but Vuetify is a component library for Vue.js that is pretty battle tested. I've been using it for years. Basically gives you like a whole bunch of UI components to create an app really swiftly. And the benefit to me in this regard was just like, I know it well, it's battle tested. I'm just going to choose that and move forward. So that's all the time I'm going to spend on that. Airtable is kind of the meat and potatoes of what powers this app. If you're not familiar with Airtable, I consider it a spreadsheet on steroids. It's been around for a while. I've been using it for a while, and I've built a lot of stuff with it. It's free. They have a really great free tier, but they do have premium options. And I'll show you some of Airtable as the talk goes on. But to me, this was something that I've built restaurant kind of ad hoc databases with in the past and built apps using Airtable. And so the decision to use this for Minimart made a lot of sense. First of all, it's got a GUI-based, it's like a GUI-based database builder. So it's like a spreadsheet, but your columns have different like data types, and there's relational database capabilities within it. You can pick objects between different tables that you create. It's really, really elegant and fast. And it has a great API that basically any column you create, it then becomes accessible on the back end. And it has a Vue.js library that is coupled with it. So it's really easy to implement. So not only is it great from a developer standpoint to be architecting an app using this kind of point and click database builder, but it also is a powerful CMS and user interface, like a GUI for end users. So whether it's a shop owner or someone else involved in the business, once the app gets off the ground, there are really robust tools with validation on different data types, like, you know, date pickers and you know, select boxes and all this stuff. And I can show you some of that in a bit. But that was like a real huge benefit for me.
Yeah, I just want to chime in for those who came to last week's talk that, you know, that Drew had shown us 8base as his backend as a service. This is also a backend as a service. By looking at the two of them, it feels like 8base feels like it comes out of like database people that really you know, kind of think of it as a database first. It just happens to be a service. Airtable feels a little bit more like it comes from people like in the mindset of spreadsheets. They seem, the Airtable functionality seems almost on par. Like they both seem great, but the Airtable stuff feels like it's also because it's more like spreadsheety, feels a little more refined for if you want to let your other users jump in and do that. And it seems like he took advantage of some of the GUI there to actually just give users the ability to jump into their own data in a much nicer way. So I just wanted to add that for people who kind of saw both talks. You can keep
Cool,
going.
thanks for that,
Sorry.
Cody. Yeah, I can show, actually can take, what's that?
I didn't say anything. I think there's a little bit of a lag, just, but I think we're doing okay. Keep going.
All right, I'll persevere. Again, so because like Kobe was just saying, this thing is highly customizable, and because it's built from a user interface standpoint, like a spreadsheet, it's familiar enough for people who are used to using Excel and Google Sheets. So it doesn't have that like that shock of trying to understand an entire different paradigm for data management, which in terms of user adoption from a shop owner standpoint is really beneficial because it allows me to be able to do my job as a developer, but also offers tools for incredible customization on the end user end. I'm not going to go completely into like all of Airtable. It's incredibly powerful and you can do pretty much anything you want with it. But I'm going to show a couple key things. The key things that I will dive into is what they call blocks, where you can basically, you have your spreadsheet and then you have these things that are, you can use the data that's in your tables and display it in a number of great ways. So I'm just going to take a pause because I don't think I actually included any like introductory piece for Airtable. How do I stop? Zoom. I love Zoom. I don't know how to stop sharing. I think I have a problem. I don't know how to stop sharing. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna just share this. Okay. Can you all see this Airtable table here?
Yep.
So this is Airtable, and this is the architecture of a Minimart store. It's got some like content management stuff. Oh, this is probably gonna get real laggy.
Wait,
basically,
real quick, do you want to show us, unless you're saving that for later, do you want to show us what Minimart looks like so that we can now then understand what the back end looks like that you're showing us? All right.
Yes, I just wanted to give a quick overview of this, and then, yeah, I guess that makes sense. That's a good call. No, that's a good call. Okay, so take a pause here and do a quick order with Minimart. Every user on Minimart gets a subdomain. That's whatever their store is called, and they have a bunch of different CMS controllable elements that are based off of their Airtable installation. So you basically have two things. You've got your it's a site that's deployed on Netlify, and then it uses environmental variables to reference a specific Airtable instance and links the two together. So there's a unique site and there's a unique Airtable for each one of these things. I'll go into how that the pros and cons of that in a little bit. But to start an order, I'm just going to enter my test phone number. This is also, you guys can go on here and experiment with this and get a feel for yourself if you want to check it out. Demo.minimartapp.com. But I'm going to start an order, and this is going to bring up my menu and this kind of sushi style ordering system that I've put together. So you can go ahead and just like add a couple things here. Get some albondigas lunches. You can pick what week you want it to order for. A lot of these people are doing like weekly inventory and prepping for each week and doing delivery and fulfillment each week. So the organizational structure for the offerings is based on weeks. So I'm going to choose this week, the 13th and 19th. You decide which type of order you're placing, either pickup or delivery. Based on that, it dynamically shows these different options that are also pulling from Airtable. Sometimes customers like to do things like they deliver to different parts of the city on different days. So these are just text-based little chips that are up here. So if you want to say something that's like Hollywood-Wednesday and Santa Monica-Friday, you can do that. And it's as flexible as the shop owner wants, which is, I found to be pretty beneficial. There's a delivery fee that comes up. It's delivery, it's pickup. You choose like one of the pickup days. I'm gonna add a little note here, and then I'm just gonna place the order. when it places the order, it creates an order on Airtable, and then it also creates order items that are attached to that order. And so you can always reference, this brings you to the order invoice. And so you can always reference that through this unique ID that Airtable has provided for that order. And then you can see all the related items here. So this is like the invoice page.
I just want to chime in again. It's so simple, but it's just so elegant the way that you did that last order page. Like it's just like such a no-brainer. It's so clear what you're doing. It's just like, again, I know it's like so simple, but like people tend to overcomplicate things, but it just feels really elegant. So well done on just like the design of it.
Thank you. Yeah, again, that was like a major part of this, like speed and performance on mobile is obviously a big concern here too, because a lot of this stuff is happening on Instagram. So, you know, I didn't want to be allowing people to upload like huge images of, you know, crappy pictures of their food or nice pictures of their food. So text-based stuff was like, I think I was trying to design with text and CSS as much as possible. So I appreciate that. Once the order comes in, that'll show up on like the orders table in Airtable. And you can see that this last order, order 59, is right here. So this is, it just creates a row, just like in any database, but it has these relational columns. So like here's the customer, here's the week that I ordered for, and then here's a list of the order items. If I go into the order items table, I did something with Airtable that's one of its strongest suits, I feel. You can create these different views that can like group and sort and filter things. So if you just look at the main grid view, like this is basically just a spreadsheet of all the different order items for every order that's been placed. But I created a view that I saved called tickets, which orders things by, it groups the order items by their order and essentially creating a ticket view. So this shows you, it's like a relational link to this item that has its price and all of its properties from, there's this little arrow on Airtable that shows you this is coming from the items table, which is part of the menu management structure. But it shows you, you know, this relational overview. It's got great, like, you know, you can have a summary of different types of data, like right in line on this group view. It's really a very well-designed product that's very lightweight, and you can do a ton of stuff with it. But for every Minimart, I provide customers with a bunch of these different views, which allow them to meaningfully like sift through their data and be able to like look at this ticket and know that a customer needs, you know, 2 fire mushroom doshirak, 1 cosmic juice bottle of wine, 2 albondigas, and then sales tax is obviously more of an administrative note.
Beautiful
but,
and good
yeah,
use of this.
Thanks. Does anyone feel like they need a little more before we dive into what it looks like on the other end of things? Any questions?
So from the store's point of view, this is what they're actually interacting with is Minimart, Airtable?
Correct. From an admin standpoint, this is what the user has been, this is the UI, like the CMS UI that they get.
So like do they get like a ding or something, like a new order is in and they come here and they say, okay, order number 59, and then they start processing it?
I'm actually, I'll show you on Netlify, I'm using serverless functions to actually send transactional email with SendGrid. So every time an order comes in, an invoice goes to the customer and tells them that their order has been received. And then SendGrid also sends an email to the owner that tells them that a new order has been placed.
Okay, cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward
Any
to
other questions? What's that?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how you did all that.
Yeah, for sure. Does anybody have any other questions before I move on? Okay, cool. Feel free to interrupt whenever. All right, so that's an overview of basically what happens. I guess while we're here, I can just show you that the menu management portion of this is very similar. Like this is just a spreadsheet that has different columns for how to represent items on a menu. So here's the name of the item, the unit, the price, whether it's hidden or not. 86 is an industry term, meaning that something's like out of stock. I launched an inventory feature about a month ago that automatically deducts the quantity of inventory as orders get placed. You can designate something as unlimited if you can always sell that and you don't want it to be determined by stock or inventory. And then here's the category, which again is this dynamic link to the categories tab or table. And this is like basically like a menu section. And when you're here, you can actually see that there is the dynamic backlinking of all the items that are in this category. So if we go to Minimart and I click start an order again, you can see that if we're referencing the truffles category, we'll see that it has black truffles and black truffles by the pound. We go back here and we go down to truffles. This one is sold out, and I think the other one is hidden. But it's just it's like a very simple way of kind of codifying the structure between items and categories. It's just a very simple relational database structure. So let me stop sharing, figure that out, how to do that. I'm really proud of myself. And I'll get back to this demo here. So this is kind of what I was just showcasing. Here's the tickets view that I just went over. And this is the items view on the bottom here that I also
Can you go larger?
It's
a little window right now.
Oh, I figured it would be full screen. Is that better?
Yeah, keep going. Unless, I don't know if there's a way to, yeah, there you go. We can read it now.
Okay, I'm gonna try to just share that window.
Yeah, there you go. That's what you should do. Boom.
Is that looking good?
Yep.
Okay. So that was the stuff that I just went over. And then blocks is, I feel like it's going to crash Zoom if I try to do this just because it's parsing a lot of data. But blocks are these things that appear in like the sidebar. And you can see like this maps block here. This stuff is crazy and it's super powerful. Like I got a Google Maps JS API key and I just install it and then pick a view on the orders table. And I basically said, you can see this little yellow tag here that says Monday unfilled orders. I basically said, I designate one column for the address of all these orders. And I'm only showing what's unfilled on Monday. And this shows me all of my delivery orders and where they are in Los Angeles. And it took me about 5 minutes to set this up. I was already capturing the delivery address data for the delivery orders. And this took me all of 5 minutes. And the value that it gives the shop owners is tremendous. You now have the capability of determining delivery routes. I'm working with someone who actually has started hiring drivers and can dispatch them and can group the different delivery orders by their region and kind of assign that to a different driver. So that's an immense amount of value that I'm getting from Airtable. The page designer down here is a dynamic way of, you basically can go through each different record and design something that pulls in the data and displays it in the way that you want. And they use that for print tickets to like staple it onto a bag or to make sure that they have it in the back in their kitchen while they're prepping or packing orders. The sales dashboard, these are actually 4 different blocks that we're looking at. And these are your standard graphs and whatnot. They're like some call out items that you can just do like a sum or max or median or whatever on different data sets and just have them displayed. So it's this entire control center for the restaurant owner. And this is more or less out of the box for Airtable.
Unbelievable. And such good use of these tools. We have all these tools available to us and everybody wants to roll their own, and to get this going, the amount of functionality you have that you've given these people in such a short period of time, and just knowing how to use the tools and using them well is just incredible. So it's great. Right.
Yeah, thanks. The next slide is digging into the Vue.js library for Airtable. So without going super deep into it, I create what are called services for each of my different tabs. Like each of my tables on Airtable has a service. So this is for like my orders tab. I've created this simple, basically like an internal API to make all the calls to Airtable. So I have an Axios instance that has the connection data. Axios is a request library if you aren't familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it and you're a Vue dev, you should absolutely check it out because it's kind of like the gold standard of XHR libraries at this point. But so these are like,
I just want to make sure we're following the workflow. You're saying that this is used within, this is basically what's deployed on Netlify, and it goes and grabs data from Airtable?
the concept of a service is more something that is like the layer in between like the Vuex store and the API. So this this gets imported into like a component. And so when I click place order, it calls order service.create, which I'll show you in a second. And then it hits the API.
But that is hosted where? Where is that? Where is that?
This is
code
just a
that's
module in my Vue.js code. So
but so everything is on Netlify. Where is that code residing, or that's just like on your personal machine?
it's not like a node script or serverless or anything. This is just a JavaScript file in my stack and my Vue app.
Okay.
I mean, I am deploying everything with Netlify. Each time I deploy it, it deploys the entire Vue app to a different site so that I can have multiple different versions of this app running for each subdomain and for each Airtable instance.
I think the first question was, is this hitting the Airtable API, right? And I think the answer to that is yes, right?
It is, yeah. Thanks for clarifying, James. In the header of this file, there's actually, I didn't show it, but in Axios, you can define like the base URL property. And basically I just like, I pass in, I mean, I can just show that real quick if it would be helpful. Give me 1 second, guys.
Why? I was just kind of curious. I mean, why did you not make it async?
What do you mean?
Oh, the calls to Axios.
You mean why is it returning the promise?
No, why is it not? Why is it not done asynchronously? Because it looked like these are synchronous calls. Is that right?
Right, but it's returning. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
It's returning a promise.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use async off of this in other instances, like.
Okay. So when you're actually using it, you can do it asynchronously.
Right.
Okay.
For sure.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. It's a good question. Yeah, this is another service, and these are actually async calls. You know, some of this is going to be really bad code. I kind of built this all, like I said, in a long weekend, and I've been iterating over the last 3 months, but I haven't, you know, it's a totally free project. I don't have any funding. I'm not charging customers for anything. And so being able to like go back and refactor everything and like put all the modules together in a unified way is on my list of stuff I'd love to do, but I don't think I have time for it. So please don't judge me with my crappy code here. But this is the example that I was going to show in the next slide. On the invoice view that you saw, after the customer orders and they get sent to that invoice, when in the created, where's this at? In the created lifecycle hook on this view component, it is async, and it fetches the customer data based on the phone that's in the route. And if there's an order ID that's present in the slug of the route, it then fetches that order. And so that is an asynchronous call here. Oops, sorry. That is using this order service, and it is using it asynchronously. So and then it injects that into the Vuex store. Sorry if you guys don't know what Vuex is. It's not something that's really within the scope of this talk, but it's kind of the gold standard of like state maintenance for Vue. So I basically retrieve the data from Airtable that's really consistently formatted, and I put it into Vuex, and then I like inject it into the current views to allow the order to propagate and fill it out. Does that answer some of the questions about how the order service works and the kind of the Vue.js library for Airtable?
Can I see the code above that calls the date get order again? I missed that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oops. Created. So when we're looking at this this view, it's going to be the slug here, something like this. I didn't plan on going into too much detail about the code, so I'm a little underprepared in that regard, but just bear with me. So the invoice view is going to get a slug like this. So we know that we have the customer phone number, which is being used here to fetch the customer data. And then it also has this order ID, which is also part of the route. And so it waits to fetch the customer, and then it fetches the order. And this uses the get order call. And get order is kind of a wrapper function or method that is using the order service to, so it's just a way of like having a cleaner code here. So instead of having to write out my entire Axios call, I just say like, order service, this thing always only deals with orders, and I want you to find this order ID. There's this really brilliant developer, Marcus Oberlehner. I don't know if you guys follow his work in Vue, but he has really great like abstract methodologies about developing like CRUD systems in Vue and how to dry out your Vue state. And he's been posting some great stuff about services and kind of like normalization in Vuex. I would look him up, Marcus Oberlehner. And I think some of his methodology made its way into this. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just to demonstrate in the top of the order service file here, I only showed the export part, but I'm creating an Axios instance that basically uses an environmental variable that says like which Airtable base should we be looking at. And it just, for every one of the Axios calls in this file, it starts there. And that allows me to just pass it like get/ID. And it's basically using this whole URL and then passing it /order ID.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a shorthand, and you can create Axios instances all over your app that have specific headers, authorization, base URLs. So you can create a bunch of them across the app and then use them as shorthand, which makes it a lot more readable and, in my mind, maintainable. I think readability and maintainability are kind of connected. For the sake of time, I'm going to get back to the other stuff, but please interrupt me if you guys want to dig further into this. And I'm happy to, after this talk, after tonight, whatever, I'm available to continue to talk about this as much as anyone wants to give me time for it. Let me get back to this. So this is the order service. I have like a customer service, an order item service, a shop service. All these things are abstracted and readable for me. And so this next slide is basically what I just showed you, but this is the usage of that kind of service in line. This gets called the created lifecycle hook to display the invoice or the order data. Okay, so moving on to deployment. When I had to decide about deployment, Netlify was a complete no-brainer. If you're not familiar with Netlify, you need to check it out. They have an incredible free tier that gives you a tremendous amount of like everything. It's just such a pleasure to work with Netlify. Everyone on their support team is super friendly. They're just, it seems like a really great company. I've listened to some podcasts, the Full Stack podcast featured some of the people on their team. They seem really great. They have an incredible product. I've used it a lot. It basically has like Git-based deployments. So in a matter of minutes, you can deploy a set of code to whatever URL you'd like. They give you, a URL out of the box that says like brokencamel1522.netlify.com. But it's really, really easy, and it uses CI/CD. I don't know if that's the right usage of that term, but continuous deployment. As long as you push to Git, you can control it to deploy based on branches, based on PRs, anything. And so when I have like 19 different instances of sites, as soon as I make one push to master, that redeploys all my sites and gives it the freshest code, unless I specify otherwise and stop like the auto publishing feature. For all these reasons, I think it's the best option for rapid prototyping and development. They have incredible cache busting. It's a really, really well-made product, both from the user experience standpoint and from a developmental standpoint. Again, you can get these unique subdomains, which was like a major criteria for choosing the stack, get place deploys, like I just said, and multi-tenancy using env variables. Multi-tenancy is a concept that I only became familiar with as I started thinking through this problem with my startup Resto. Basically, the idea is like you have one set of code and you want it to show a bunch of different things based on which environment it's deployed to. You want to have many tenants. So you like think of clients, like if I have the bread store, the cheese store, and the fish store, each one of those is tenants that's using the same set of code. Multi-tenancy is often referred to with regards to databases. So having, I don't know if I'm misspeaking here actually, but generally like if you have one single database that houses the data from a bunch of different users, that's considered multi-tenant. So I'm using that nomenclature here. I don't know if that's right or not, but basically deploying one code base and having it provision multiple sites. Like you saw in the code example that I just gave, you plop in what the, Netlify has a really elegant UI for this. You basically drop in what Airtable base ID you want, and it does the rest. And when it deploys at build time, when it's building your Vue app, it integrates that app ID, and it makes sure that all the calls are only going between that deployed instance and the Airtable instance in this case. Kobe, can you let me know if that seemed like a decent explanation?
I think it did. I admittedly already have thought about it, and so I don't know if I was understanding what you already said. Does anybody else want to chime in? Does that make sense? If we want to, I mean, it's a pretty critical concept here, and I think it's really cool how he's thought about building this out. It's basically 19 different identical sites. I mean, that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about it when I think of multi-tenancy. One code base, you change the environmental variable to basically let you know which restaurant it is, and it deploys it to, again, 19 different people have 19 different sets of data, but it's not just, it's not one monolith that has 19 users. It's essentially 19 different apps. Right. When he updates the code base, it goes to 19 different places, and they each have access to their own individual, completely separate data stores or data.
Right.
Anybody want to chime in? Is there anything else you'd add to how you think of that?
I just have one question with how you implemented that. Did you do multiple like different projects on Netlify using the same code base? Okay.
Yeah, let me show you here. I have that pulled up. Can you see this, Matt?
Yeah. Yep.
So this is all of my different deploys on Netlify, and each one is a Minimart store, and they're connected in different ways. And like, I'll show you if I drill down into this thing, you can go to, this is like the demo Minimart. Go to domain settings, or it's under environment. So this is just where you add your environmental variables. And this is like, what Airtable are we looking at? And this is like some other nonsense that needs to be updated, but that's it. I just basically put one env var in, and it knows exactly what to look at, and it has provisioned these 19 different sites, mainly so that I can, since I don't have access to the server directly, I don't have like a vhost file or something that I could do to provision multiple subdomains. It's a little like above my pay grade. I'm not really like a DevOps guy or a sysops, whatever. But does that answer your question, Matt?
It does, yeah, that's great. And then, so if you push a commit to master on your repo, will it automatically deploy all of the projects?
There are a couple that I know are no longer wanting to like receive updates, or some of them people are like taking breaks. So for the sake of build speed, I kind of turn things on and off whether they're active. But yeah, essentially anything that has auto deployment set up, which you can set up with there's a concept of auto deployment, and then there's a concept of auto publishing. Netlify is so great for this because it can build your whole thing, and it can have it just sitting there And when you're ready to publish it, you can go publish that version of the app. Like I could go back and like have something from in June, and I can publish this version of it, and it's like instantaneously pushed. Sorry if that's a little tangential, but
That's great. Awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So I think I'm running a little short on time here, so I'm going to keep pushing through here. Something that's incredible about Netlify that I kind of touched on already is that out of the box, you can use service functions. You can basically, serverless functions, for people who don't know, they're these servers that only exist for the time that it takes to execute something. So if you need to send an email, you can basically tell your service that you want to send that email, and the like 150 milliseconds that it takes to send that email is the only time the server is spun up and then is spun down when the execution is finished. Netlify offers functions at like their 0 free level. All you have to do is you have like a part of your app that says /functions, like a directory called functions, and you drop a JS file in there. They have great documentation on how to do it, and it becomes an endpoint. So I can send things to /send email on my service, but any one of these 19 different deployments have an endpoint called /send email that spins up a serverless function, which is basically a node function that exists for like as long as it takes to execute it, and it creates a transactional email on SendGrid, or a number of them. It's super powerful. It basically means that you don't need to spin up your own like node server or backend to be able to handle these extra microservices for your app. So it's pretty all-inclusive in terms of Netlify's capabilities. And it also means that instead of having to, if I had to pass an API key to SendGrid to validate that action of sending the transactional email, if I did that from the front end, that would be vulnerable to some sort of like man-in-the-middle attack or something like that, where you could see what the authorization header was and steal that information. But because it's existing on the back end, I can add that as like a node variable, and only at runtime on the secure backend does that actually get executed and exposed. So it allows you to do like, when I'm getting ready to set up Stripe, which is like a next big release for this thing, credit card integration, all of that payment processing stuff is going to happen on the back end. Even though Stripe doesn't like require that you handle any sensitive data, which is so great about it, it's still, any of those API keys and stuff are only being handled between this server and the API that you're using.
Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, keep going.
Serverless functions is immensely powerful, and I'm sure there are people who are much more expert than I am in its use cases. But yeah, happy to talk about my knowledge after the talk if anyone has questions. So this is basically the state of where Minimart is right now. Since mid-March, my users have sold almost $145,000 in revenue. There are 19 active shops. Just in credit card fees alone, $4,200 has been saved towards what would otherwise be spent by these vendors. And that doesn't include the courier fees that, if they had to depend on Postmates or something like that, could be another 10 to 30% off. I don't really know how to calculate that quantitatively, but it's definitely a huge savings. And right now it's being used in 5 different cities across 3 states. I just created an Instagram account last week. I'm starting to spread the word via social media, even though I hate it. I am trying to grow this thing and give it to as many people as possible, especially to get more involved in communities of color and Black-owned businesses. So if anyone knows anyone who thinks this could be useful for their business, I'm happy to give them a talk. The future of Minimart is a little unclear. Right now, I'm happy to continue growing it at like this kind of slow and sustainable pace. I really would like it to be in the hands of more people around the world. But there are a few different, I'm kind of at a fork in the road right now. Scaling and migrations is the first concern. As you can see, if each customer has their own Airtable, if I need to go change the name of a column, or I need to change a data type in a certain column, or add one, remove it, any type of data migration, I need to go in by hand to 19 different Airtables, make sure that I type the name of the column right, make sure that I save it right, stage the deployment, and do like intermediary versions and have a whole database myself to manage whether I'm screwing that stuff up by hand. It's just hugely error prone and really time consuming. So the idea of recreating this service without Airtable is really appealing from that standpoint. But there is a question of what the cost benefit is of that move. It's how many of these different Airtable tools would I have to recreate for users to be satisfied with the product I deliver? What's the minimum viable product for what I can provide? Is it better to just have a team of volunteers who are well-trained or collaborators on this project to be able to implement those changes instead of having to kind of pay back all the tech debt from needing to build these migrations? So there are a lot of questions there, and I'm just starting to wrap my head around them. Next thing is finances and revenue model. Again, this is completely free. So I'm trying to figure out what the next step is. Maybe partnering with a nonprofit organization, maybe getting some private funding from a charitable donor, maybe starting to charge for the product in some minimal way where I can sustain the work that I do on it and that my customers are still receiving the benefit of what I started out to do and what my mission was. Another idea that I have is to integrate this set of offerings into my startup, Resto. Resto is basically right now, it doesn't have any way to transact. It doesn't have any commerce portion to it because it was really focused on menu updating and menu management. But I see this as, there's no doubt in my mind that I need to start offering that kind of service, especially now that we're all under quarantine and the rules have changed so quickly and so dangerously around restaurants. So the question of how I fold this into Resto is, there are a few different major questions. The amount of tech debt that I've had to pay back to get it integrated in terms of both the front end and the back end, building out the architecture of the database. I think it'll be very valuable for my Resto customers. And I think there also is an opportunity for this to be like a sales funnel, but also kind of like a baby Resto thing, where people who are just ad hoc, running services on Instagram, they get their own mini mart, they build their business up, and then after they hit a certain amount of revenue or they're ready to graduate and have a full-fledged, fully branded business, they can move on to something more robust, which I also happen to offer. So I'm happy to talk about that. If anyone wants to spend time thinking through that stuff, I'd be stoked because it's all I think about all day. And I'm also open to volunteers, as I show here with this hot dog graphic. So if anyone wants to join me in this project as a developer or whatever, holler. I won't bite too hard. And here's some contact deals. Thank you so much for your time. I'm super honored to be presenting to this group that I care so much about, and I appreciate all your attention. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
This is awesome. Everyone unmute yourself for a second. Let's do a little
Yay.
Good job, Eli.
Thank you.
That's very cool.
let me open up some questions. We've got a few more minutes. Does anybody have any just general questions, thoughts? It looks like if anybody wants to pitch him on the $10 million you're going to give him to join his company. Anybody have any questions? Anything they want to chime in with, please?
I have a thought just on one of those last points that you made, Eli, or that thought on how do you scale the database design, given that you're using Airtable and you have to make a bunch of changes for each customer. If there's a way to maybe have a conventional database, like a Postgres database or something, that actually powers the front-end user experience, but you're able to leverage Airtable as the admin interface and sync Airtable to that database, that might be a solution that lets you leverage the Airtable UI, but gives you something more practical for other, for user-facing scalability, but also maybe you can offload some of the responsibility that's in the Airtable database into your Postgres database, like relationships between tables and things like that. So that's just a thought, because yeah, Airtable, the UI is awesome and super powerful. So if there is a way to keep that, while finding scale somehow, then that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable thought. And I started going down that road a little bit and thinking that maybe there were some CMS functionalities that I could offload to an existing service and just retain the like e-commerce portion that the owner is really diving into a lot. I don't know if Airtable allows you to create and destroy columns or manipulate the actual data structure via the API. I think it might just be like a read-write situation, but it's definitely worth looking into. I think that's a great idea. So thanks for that.
Anyone else?
I got one.
Please.
I think it's around the same topic of Airtable. Do you know if Airtable has like APIs available that will allow you to write, you know, like a migration script you would normally write for like an RDMS, that will allow you to, I guess, document the tables in code. So like, you know, deploying this code will actually get those tables and Airtable set up a certain way. And whenever you modify that code, it will actually, you know, go and change it everywhere, I guess, is a question.
Yeah, I think that's a similar concern. Can you, so basically like, it would show a DB diff essentially to see like what mutations you ran on the data structure and then reproduce them across all the different instances?
Correct. So like, I mean, you would have to document like a migration lineage, right? Just like how you would with a normal table migration, but like it will be expected that you're always caught up, but like whenever you have a new one, it will run that one mutation and yeah, it'll know how to run it in a linear fashion,
right,
continuously, right? So if you ever did set up a new customer, it will start from scratch and run all the migrations through to get it to the current state.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially what that would be like creating a layer that offers migrations on top of Airtable.
Correct.
Which would, it would be a really cool community project. If the API did allow that, it would open up the possibilities for developers to use it in a lot more low friction way. So
yeah,
maybe there's it's worth contacting Airtable to see what kind of solution they could offer.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking at the chat while I was talking. I don't know if there's, Andrew asked, who are your competitors? Yelp. I think the competitors are everyone from like any kind of online presence. So that's doing e-commerce or that's doing website development. So I'd say anyone from Squarespace to Yelp to OpenTable to Instagram. Like everyone is trying to do everything right now in the restaurant tech space. Like point of sales are now offering websites and websites are offering point of sales, like kind of soup to nuts. So this is kind of, it's going against a lot of other existing products, but I think it's particularly lightweight and nimble and is targeting a demographic that doesn't have a lot of expendable income. So most big corporations don't want to target them, but I'm just here to like help that community. So I feel like my tack is a little different than like what's the total penetratable market value kind of thing. Like I'm not really asking those questions right now, which is both stupid from a capitalism standpoint, but fine for me. So, a lot of competition.
Anyone else? I just want to circle back and reiterate. How long ago did you start this thing?
I think I've deployed the first site in like March 23rd, something like that.
So what, 4 months? Not even?
Yeah.
And you have 19 customers?
Yeah, and they've done almost $150,000 in revenue. It's
That's
pretty cool.
crazy, man. It's crazy. Yeah. Good for you. It's really amazing. That deserves another.
Excellent.
That's like. I mean, for those who are less technical on this call, like just the amount of stuff that is being accomplished in such a short period of time is unbelievable. And you know, so much of coding these days is just like knowing what tools are out there and just taking the time to understand them and how to mold them into what you want in like a really useful way. And just so much of the stuff that companies would have done if you were kind of like kind of like the traditional way, you would have to build so much of this from scratch. I'm imagining like, the team of people who spent 8 weeks creating that Google block
Right.
alone, right?
Right.
I mean, and the amount of that you're giving to your customers in such a short period of time is just really unbelievable. And I'm sure that because people just take for granted that you just like get stuff on the internet these days, like they probably have no sense of how much you're giving them for that you were able to build it in such a short period of time is really incredible. So well done.
Means a lot. Thank you so much. So spread the word. If you're stoked, the more people we can help, the better. So that's where I'm at.
Nice. All right, team. Anybody any last thoughts? All right. We're gonna wrap this talk up. So everyone, thank you. Everyone, join me again. Unmute yourselves and let's say thank you again. Good job. Fantastic first talk.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for bearing with me.
We expect you to rebuild Google by the next talk. I'm gonna throw it to James now. Where are you, James? I'm not seeing your little square.
I am here.
I think I can make you host. 1 sec. I'm going to make you a co-host. And now you have immense power in this group.
I don't know how to use it.
I think it just means you can
With
screen
great
share
power
now.
comes great responsibility.
Indeed.
Right.
By the way, the person who just said that's name is literally Peter Parker. He was
What?
Peter. Our friend Pete, his last name is literally Parker, and so he gets to use that line a lot.
Gotcha.
Okay. I'm just gonna let you do your own intro, so go for it.
Cool. Hey guys, my name is James Lee, and I've been working with Vue for I'll say about 3 years, and then been an engineer for about 10 to 15 years. I forget how long. And I've been working at a company called Bambee, and ever since the company started, we chose, Vue as, I guess, the front end technology that's gonna run it, and we've been sticking with it since and love it. So I'm going to talk about Factory today, or a project called Factory. We actually don't have the right name yet. I initially said Component Factory. And then Drew said he likes Factory, so we got rid of components. But I will talk about it in a little bit. And I wanted to first, just kind of give you like a origin story of like how I came about this. And I would say it started probably 6 or 7 years ago. Like, I was at this one job that I really hated, and I was just thinking, what would be the perfect job or perfect life, depending on, if your job is what you like. And, some criteria were like, be able to work anywhere, be able to work as much or as little as you want, just having control over like how much you want to work. And, the work should be consistent and stable. You shouldn't be scared that the work is going to disappear. And, these are, the next two ones are like really like, additional things I would love is that the work be open source, so it's not just for myself or the person that I'm doing the work for, but other people can also see the work that is being done and take advantage of it. And
James, let me just interrupt you for 1 sec. Can you like unscreen share and then screen share just your PowerPoint presentation?
Oh yeah. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, no, you're good. It's still pretty readable, but can't hurt to see it closer.
Yeah.
Just do screen share again. I'll give you the options.
Oh man, I got so many windows open right now. 1 second. Why can't I find it?
If it's that much of an issue, just go full screen on that thing once you screen share.
I'm gonna do that because
Yeah, no worries.
I cannot find it, and I don't know if this helps.
That's
If it's
perfect.
not
That's
big
great.
enough,
That's great.
I can zoom in
That's perfect.
or
Keep
go
going.
full screen. Okay.
You're good.
And the last thing is just me being very picky, and this is really something for me as an engineer. Like, I wish I had one single queue to work out of instead of like having to look in various random places to figure out what I need to do, right? And about a month and a half ago, or about 2 months ago, I was having a conversation with Drew, and somehow I came to telling him about like this idea and like where it came from. And basically Drew said, hey, love the best job thesis, whatever, but what I really like is the idea around building a queue of component requests for other engineers or for engineers to tackle. And I think basically this is where me and Drew started to brainstorm in regards to how can we actually just like really quickly execute on this idea and get an MVP out, so Drew at his company Funkhaus can test it out on his projects that he has going live right now. And basically what we came up with is first, some requirements in regards to what we're going to need in regards to deliver a factory assembly line or some sort in regards to, okay, so how can someone go about defining the project specifications or requirements in regards to what that is? What are the process and guidelines in regards to what a component request is? In regards to how an engineer gets introduced or invited or introduced into, the line of work that's going to be available, what does the process look like? How does an engineer come in, grab a ticket or a component request, and how do they go on and work on it? What does the review and QA process looks like? And when everything is all good and done, how does that component get actually delivered to a specific project where it's going to be used or consumed? So after thinking about these things, we noticed that in the beginning, I was thinking I had to build like this entire web application, figure out some kind of GitHub integration, figure out how am I gonna like scaffold a project, think about how the user interface for a component request is gonna look like. But Drew quickly set out and said, hey, this looks like we could actually just do all of this in GitHub. Open source pretty much has been, doing this on, GitHub projects like for a very long time. And if you take a look at it, we can actually map every single one of these requirements today into a GitHub or a Git functionality that exists today. And, in regards to like project specifications, GitHub, I have a typo here, but GitHub uses a readme.md file that talks about, what is the project, what kind of dependencies it has. If it's a Node project or a Vue project, we have a package.json that describes, hey, we're using Tailwind or we're using Storybook, we're using Vuetify, whatever the project is using, we can define these things there. In the README, we can go into like things deeper in terms of like talking about what kind of font styles that we use, and do we use Sass or CSS variables, whatnot. We can start defining these things as part of the project in the README or in the package.json file. Next up is like, what does a component request look like? So we thought about it, and actually Drew did most of the thinking here. But he came up with some requirements, and I say, hey, that actually we can probably just make that into a component request template in GitHub, and it's like there's this thing called issues template that we can use. And Drew just went ahead and used that functionality to create a template that will allow him to just fill it out and get like a standard component request quit. And at the core of it all is really the design piece. It's like if you're using XD or if you're using Sketch, if you're using Figma, just being able to provide the good, I guess, design files or URLs that's going to be necessary to get this done. And from an engineering and developer standpoint, there's things that to talk about in regards to, does this component expect slots, or what kind of props will it expect? And if there are events, just defining like what the component request is. He has a pretty good template for it. He also mentions, okay, here is the budget for what his agency is willing to pay for someone that wants to tackle this, right? So like, we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but like this is like to just kind of set the expectation for like, this is how much the company is willing to pay if someone outside the company were to work on this ticket. And then a screenshot is just like a quick way without having to open up the design file. I think that kind of explains it. And next step up is the request queue. I guess I'll jump right into it. If you take a look at Funkhaus/factory, Drew till now has created one project, and he's so far made 8 component requests for this company so far, of which 3 are actually already done. I will take a look at one that I did for him. It was like the easiest one that he made. I thought, okay, I'll do this one. And up here, he said, he actually is being pretty detailed about. He's actually adding in things like how difficult is this component request, and then he's also tagging in like he's using labels right now to distinguish if this particular ticket has been assigned or not. But this ticket is a very basic one where it's just like a banner highlight, and that's not so descriptive until you take a look at, I guess, the XD file. It is actually this one. So I mentioned to him, it was not very clear which page in this XD file is supposed to work on, but I think that's where the back and forth process of the engineer and the issue is going to be crucial. I mean, the engineer needs to be open and know how to communicate to figure out what he needs to work on and not make a lot of assumptions. But, I did figure out it is this particular block that he wanted to work on for this ticket. And it's really very simple. It has a block that takes up 90% of the screen in terms of height. It accepts a background image, has a title and I forgot what he called it, but some subtext. And if you hover over it, there's a little animation. That's the core of this component request. And basically, I don't know if I had the process documented here, but yeah, I mean, this is just to show what it will kind of look like. It's like I will come in here and say, hey, I want this one. And then somebody on the repository maintenance side will say, all right, cool, approved, take it on. And from there on, I will start working on it and go through the rest of the process. Of which, I kind of want to ask the people on this chat here or in this call, like, who is familiar with GitHub? I assume everyone. I hope so. And then who is like not familiar with, I guess, like the forking process, or how like the PR, like basically if you don't use, I guess, GitHub, or if you use Bitbucket, it's like slightly different in regards to how things are, but there's like a PR and there's also like a fork that you can do. And I just want to get an idea of like who doesn't understand those terms.
I might suggest asking the question in reverse. Who does understand it? Because I think people are.
Gotcha.
Chime up if you're confident about it, because it's all terminology that we've all heard and may or may not to different degrees. People are sometimes like less comfortable say, yes, I know this.
So I could try to explain what I think it is, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So from my understanding, a fork is when you create a separate repository that you then are working off of, and like all of that stuff is completely separate. Whereas a PR is like you've done some work on that repository and you are potentially going to merge it into one of the branches in the repository.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much right on. Normally a fork is required because you actually don't have direct access to the project that you want to contribute to. So like if I created, or like for in this case, the factory project, Drew created this. He is the owner of the factory repository, and I am, or we are all guests, right? He could at one point, choose to give me access to it, and then I will be able to write and commit directly into the repository, but until he does so, I cannot. But that does not prevent me from actually being able to contribute work towards it. And the method that we use is we create a fork off of what he has made public. And when you create a fork, it actually creates so right now, the URL that I am looking at is GitHub Funkhaus factory, right? Because I have already forked this, if I go to Uptown HR factory, which is my repo, this is like where I can start making my commits and working towards fulfilling that ticket. And when I am done, basically I will go back into, I guess, this particular, the main, what they call upstream repository, and create a pull request of something that I have. The thing is right now I haven't created any new commits, so it doesn't show up here, but I will be able to select a branch from my fork and make a PR into the Funkhaus branch once I am done. And you can see, go ahead.
If I can just add a little color, like I guess the way that I think about it is that a lot of it starts off from the fact that if everybody's in the same repo, they're really like the repo system in Git has no concept of permissions. So you could, James has a great project, and I'm some junior developer, and once he lets me in on his repo, I could overwrite master by accident, which happens. You hear stories of that all the time. You get a new junior developer on a team, and they accidentally screw up everybody's code, and so that's a problem. And so the way they do it, where that becomes less of an issue, is that you first fork the repo, which is kind of give me a copy of the entire repo. So like James creates some awesome project, he lets me essentially make a complete copy of it. That's a fork. Now I have Kobe's version, essentially personally, of James's repo. I can make changes to it, and then when I'm like, okay, this is a version that I'm happy to have James finally take a look at and see if he wants to meld that into his code, I write what is called a pull request, and I say, hey, James, would you please review this and see if you want to add it back to the main original code base? And that's what a pull request is. It says, hey, James, please review this, and then he can choose.
Correct. Yeah. And, just to quickly demo the current, I guess, dev environment for at least Funkhaus's factory right now, and, the projects that they're working on. One is Vue. That's why we're talking about it here. And number two, he is, going with, I don't know if it's an actual term, but I've heard John use it. He decided to go with storybook-driven development, where Storybook is like a core piece in regards to how we build out UI. And we are also using Netlify to,
So just to be clear, is Storybook a methodology, or is that a proper noun? Is that like a tool that people use? No, I know. I just want you to please chime in to explain what that is real quick.
So I didn't make up Storybook-driven development. I heard it from, I think it was, the first time I heard it, I think was like a Vue conference or somewhere. Anyway, so Storybook, if you're not familiar, it's a development tool. It allows you to build and mount components. They can be Angular, React, Svelte, Vue, whatever. It allows you to build them and mount them and kind of display them in an isolated environment. Really helpful for just like when you're building out component libraries or just want to test out stuff in development. So I've been using Storybook for the last long time.
But just to be clear, is it a concept like
right.
you should create a storybook, or is there a tool?
There is a tool called Storybook. Yeah, there's a tool called Storybook. Now, like backing that, like it's an awesome tool. Storybook-driven development as a concept, something that I've heard in relation to Storybook. So that's where, like, much like test-driven development, where you write a bunch. You don't write your like actual code. You write a bunch of tests describing what you want the code to actually do, and they all fail initially, and then you write your code that will eventually satisfy all of your tests. So that's test-driven development. In storybook-driven development, this deals more with like UI components. I actually find it's a little bit more useful than like strictly test-driven development, because when you're building out a UI component, you mostly care about like, is it interacting right? Does it look right? And like, do the props variations actually do what they're supposed to do? So in storybook-driven development, you start thinking about like, okay, what are the props that I want for this component? And let me write in Storybook, your individual like examples are called stories. So like you write a bunch of examples of how your UI component specification should actually kind of like should happen. You know, just like I usually just write a gallery. I'm like, all right, let me just iterate over every possible variation that we want, and then like, you know, that way I can make changes to the code and all of them will show up there. But like that's the idea is like you think about your functional your prop specifications first, and then like you build a component within Storybook in isolation first, rather than like opening up an app and saying, I want to build out a new feature. I need to build out this component in the feature. Let me just do this in app, and like you've got, you know, all this other kind of like context around it. So it's a yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of essentially the run of it. You want to like build your component in isolation, focus on like props and UI rendering and like your input output, which leads you to build better components, because you're doing a lot more kind of like prop-based work, a lot less relying on like global context or store. So you end up making a lot more reusable components. Anyways, yeah.
Cool. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, and I just wanted to quickly demo the setup that we have put together. And, you know, as part of the, I guess, node scripts area, we have a method called sort. Whoa, how's that, guys?
A little more?
Wow.
There you go. Okay.
So we have a script called Storybook right now, which is pretty much what we only need. And I'm going to run yarn Storybook, or if you're using NPM, you can do npm run Storybook. And you know, it's going to go through the build, and it should automatically launch a website at the end of this. And let me know if this is something you guys can see as well. I will zoom in a little bit. And you know, this is pretty much what the Storybook UI looks like. And on the left here is like based on some kind of naming convention, it does set up like a little collapsible folder structure. These are all the stuff that I've worked on. It's just, you know, that simple banner component that we just talked about. And, you know, it allows me to actually start developing with this user interface in front of me with all the traditional and standard hot module reloading and like the Vue developer environment available to me. So from here, I'm not going to spend too much time, you know, playing around with this. I'm going to just quickly show you that if I
zoom in.
Let me see if I have Zoom. Okay, good. Cool. And if you take a look at the directory structure, we have a source directory in here, which has a components directory, and each and one of these components will have a .stories. This is where our Storybook definitions are in place. And a simple one like this, you know, this was created by me, and here's the title. And I talked to you about the naming structure that we had, and then basically this slash makes you know, this folder up here, and it just makes that possible. But basically, all I'm doing is importing my component in. This is some mock data that Funkhaus has made available to me as a developer to work with. And you know, in Storybook, there's something called default that you can export, and this is pretty much a default component that you're exporting out. And I've defined that in my template area, that I'm gonna just use my banner highlight, and I'm gonna pass in my image and two prop into this component. And basically the result is this, and I have some other variants with, like, you know, where I'm passing in a different title or where I'm passing in a different prompt, which updates that. And those can be defined in these other areas. And I can create more variants if I wanted to.
James, just so that like, I feel like it was mentally the easiest way to possibly follow the workflow of how you were kind of given this as an assignment. If it's essentially a marketplace where someone's assigning you something, and then you acted as the person who built it. You know, walk us through, like, this is step one, and then I built this, and this is step two,
Gotcha.
and then I built this. Just like as
Sure,
an example, like real quick for us to follow.
For me, you know, it was helpful for me to see like a sample component that was done. And so by the time I was here, there was one sample component that I was able to copy and paste, really. So I forget which one it is, where it was the sample, but there was one where I think it was blocked work that was already done, and it was there kind of for me to use. So I copied and pasted this entire directory, right? And the thing I had to change was just first all the namings, where I had to make it banner highlight. So I changed all the naming to banner highlight. So even my component, I made sure, actually, I don't think I changed anything here, but like all the styles that it was referencing, you know, Funkhaus wanted me to make sure that the main top level class name is the same as the component name. So I went to all the places where I had to handle any kind of naming, and I changed that. And in regards to the stories,
that's a good way to like see, like, these are the specifications they gave you. Okay.
Correct. Cool. Yeah. So I created a mock. I didn't really change anything, but I just made sure I at least had the banner highlight view file. And then the next step for me was, you know, defining the stories for me to play around with. So the first thing I did is again, all the naming I had to cut or replace all in regards to everything that used to be block featured to banner highlight, and I got that updated. And the first thing that I focused on was, you know, creating this default case where only the image is passed down as a prop. I do see that I've added this, but like, if you were to take a look at the properties that my component supports, it has a to, which is required, has an image, it's default, but I didn't want to just show like a blank thing as an example. So I added in something for the image URL. But text and prompt are, you know, actually contains default values here. So I didn't have to fill those in for the default scenario that I was working on. And I just focused on working on this. And basically I'm importing in my component banner highlight, and I'm creating a data area that I'm gonna pass into the component that I'm consuming in here. And basically after this point, you will actually start being able to preview this area. And just that's a quick like demonstration of how it would have looked like. It's like, I would have said default sample, and let's say title equals Vue.js, right? So I just created a new story, and now we have a new default sample story that appeared here. And I don't know why my prop didn't work. Hold on. Is a title? Oh, wrong prop that I used. I'm gonna change this to text. And now it says Vue.js. So this is this is pretty much it. This is pretty much what Storybook is, and like Storybook just gives you a working interface to build one component at a time, and it's different variants that you want to be able to demonstrate that your component is capable of doing. Okay, and I'm gonna kind of move on from here and say that I will commit my code, and then I will create that PR, the pull request that we just talked about, and instead of doing a new one, there's already PRs that other people have worked on. I believe other than myself and one individual, they're all internal to Funkhaus at the moment. But Drew is actually inviting everybody here at Vue.js meetup to check it out. And if you want to contribute to it, take a stab and see what you guys can achieve. But yeah, just make sure to be in communication with Drew, or else, I think today is a little bit difficult. But let's take a look at one sample component request PR that's happened here. I'm going to take a look at this gallery text one. This feels like this engineer that made this PR didn't fill in the PR template. Like he literally just left the template as is and didn't swap out what the project name is or the component name is. Like these things should have been filled out. So it looks like Drew did request changes. I don't know what it is, but there'll be a back and forth, between the maintainer, which is Drew in this case, and the engineer of like, hey, I didn't like these things, and he will say, or he'll ask questions or whatnot, and we'll go back and forth. From Drew's end, he will actually also have a deploy preview link here that gets automatically created by Netlify. And if I if I click on the detail link here, it will actually take me to a page where Storybook has been built based on the commit that this engineer has made. He worked on, this is called gallery text. So it was Ibanza Joe, and it was gallery text. And this is what he worked on. And we can see that, or Drew can come here and see that it's like, is it working as expected? He can test out these hover features and whatnot and comment on if he likes it or not. And then basically that kind of covers it, right? So I talked about the request queue where people can take in components. I talked about what the review and QA process would look like. It's really just the GitHub PR and then also the Netlify preview link that it generates. So from either the reviewer or from a QA person standpoint, they can actually take a look at the work without having to run any commands. It's just automatically there. And then, this last part is something that has not been done yet on the Funkhaus project, but it's something that we at Bambee, John actually put in place. A continuous delivery path of whenever we actually accept a PR and merge that into our master branch, it will kick off a GitHub action that we created, and it will deploy to our npm repository. So we've also open sourced our UI kit, and we call it Pollen. And we have a GitHub repo here. We haven't subscribed to the whole component factory and request pattern or initiative that we're talking about at Funkhaus right now. It's something I've mentioned with with our executive team, and they are open to it. So in the future, we may actually have component requests that are going to be put on our GitHub repository as well. So when that happens, I will update all you guys, and I'd be interested in seeing if other people are going to contribute and see how that flow looks like.
Just to be clear, you guys wrote your own UI, called Pollen,
Correct.
essentially?
So this is like the UI system specifically for Bambee, and again, we did open source it pretty recently.
Nice.
This is the work of John Jandok, that's over here. So he should really be talking about this, but we've open sourced it. We're also using Storybook driven development. He's a fan of Tailwind. These are components that have all been built using Tailwind, and you know, we're like in stage 1 of our component delivery process right now. I think we're about 75-80% there. John, does that sound about right? Of the initial phase?
Sure. Yeah. There's plenty of work. I mean,
Okay.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
qualifiers, and then version 1 of the first stage, almost there. The answer then is yes.
Yeah, but basically we have a lot of components that we're gonna need, and I think as soon as we talk about it internally in regards to how we're gonna actually ask for it, and if we're gonna do it openly in regards to outside contributors, we will see. But you know, I've got at least an initial approval. We just have to get the details down in regards to how we're gonna do it here at Bambee. But yeah, so I just wanted to show that whenever like we were to actually merge, I'm not gonna do that because it's failing something right now, but if you were to merge that in, it would actually kick off a GitHub action that takes that last build that was merged in and it will publish to NPM. Like we've done some recent naming changes to our organization, so it looks kind of weird right now because it says Bambee HR in the description, but it's actually just Bambee. So like we do have to clean up a thing or two, but it will publish automatically into here, and then our engineers at Bambee can actually just run yarn upgrade or npm upgrade and get the latest version of Pollen and use the new components that are available. This process was difficult for me to implement at Funkhaus. Two big reasons. One was, Funkhaus is an agency, right? So they don't just have like this one UI library. The process for them is like every single project that they have, every single customer that they have, actually has a branch. So till now, is the only component request that came through has been a project called Make, and all the work being done for the Make component request is being done under this current branch. And we have to do some GitHub action / npm wizardry to make this these npm packages based on branches, and I didn't look into that deeply yet to be able to get that done automatically. So that was a little bit challenging. And then number two is like also from Drew and Drew's engineers perspective, I think there's a level of familiarity of like doing development based on a external component library. So like he's had some concerns of his engineers being effective doing work that way. So right now Drew's choosing to copy and paste from this repo to his main repo to get work done. But clearly that is not the best scenario. So like this is a work in process in regards to how it can work for an agency setting. But I think like it's a key thing that, as this project proceeds, would be a big milestone win if it can make it work for an agency. But yeah. And I think the last thing I wanted to talk about, really is just like, the factory project, just defines all the various things that makes it, their factors, like what goes into it. It's like, it's built out on Vue. Does it use any other UI libraries like Vuetify? Does it have like strict style guides in regards to code? Does it have like an ESLint file? Does it have a prettier file? Does it use TypeScript, right? And when it comes to showing design, what kind of design system does it have? Does it use Figma, Sketch, or is it Photoshop or Illustrator? Like how does it go about doing all these things? I didn't write everything here, but also talking about font sizes and the various, I guess, variables that are available for the engineers to use are things that the factory should define. So it's very clear. And then lastly, we kind of went over this already, but it was just like at a high level, this is really the standard GitHub workflow that all the open source projects on GitHub follows. And at least what we have created so far to make this component request work, it's really no different from the standard GitHub workflow. That's pretty much it. I'll just close it up by saying that, right now, next steps for the factory project is really testing to see that, it makes sense from a company perspective. I think from an engineer perspective, outside of like how much money or like the reason why the engineer will work on something, makes sense. There's obviously a clarification in regards to component requests, but from my experience so far, that part has been pretty good. I think, but from an agency perspective, like, at least Funkhaus needs to be profitable, or it needs to make sense for them to use this process. But so far, I've heard good things about it in regards to like how much more work he can get done. I'm waiting to see when he wraps up this first make project up to see if it was it more profitable? Was it like 2 times faster, 3 times faster? I don't know what the answers to that is, but I'm kind of waiting on to seeing how that works out.
You mean just the concept of essentially outsourcing to other people, whether or not that makes sense for them versus just doing it internally?
Yeah. I mean, because there's like, I think the challenges is like when new engineers come into a project, are they able to understand how to work in this workflow very efficiently? And then number 2, because Funkhaus is an agency and he's dealing with multiple projects, like once the components are built and he attempts to use these components that are built in the projects, what kind of issues does he face? And what does the back and forth of like bugs being reported look like? And there are some challenges in regards to the entire life cycle of a component, and outside engineers being involved, right? So like what happens if an engineer does this one component and like disappears for like a month or 2, right? Like, so I think there are some challenges, and I'm just waiting to see his experience and his thoughts after he finishes a project based on this workflow.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a good point about how, kind of there's all these like intangible benefits when you work internally with people that you kind of just like, this is just the way we do things, right?
Right.
And that's potentially lost by having an outsider. It just gets me thinking that like maybe some of the answer is, and documentation here is kind of already starting to go in that direction, is creating some sort of like standard for like what does a component look like?
Right.
Because a component could work, but 2 different developers internally can make that component look very, very differently, right?
Correct.
And it kind of also makes me think of like the JSON API, which is say that JSON pre-existed for a long time, and every single person had completely different looking JSON. It all works, but like everybody needs to learn like this is what JSON looks like in our company, let's say, right? And then more recently now there's like this this standard they're trying to push out there and evolve. It's like this is what all JSON should look like. Like it's organized in these exact very specific ways. And so kind of sort of almost putting like that spec out there, and kind of like so it's understood if you come into the ecosystem, if you know how to create a component that like this is like the standard way, like this is like the best practices in design for like what components look like. Maybe that starts getting to answer some of your it starts being a solution for you a little bit for like how you get standardized looking components out of strangers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I think a lot of it, it's about having the content documented and made in a way where it's consumable by new people coming in, right? And I see that as an ongoing project that's going to improve over time. I don't think we're going to be able to like get everything without much feedback at this point.
Sure.
But yeah, I definitely agree that there's like this training aspect to it, documentation aspect to it. Maybe even some kind of a certification aspect of like, before you can actually take on paid work, you go through a series of like sample tickets that says, all right, you know what our style guidelines are and things like that. So there's a few things, you know, we've discussed so far, but ultimately it's just a lot of work getting things documented first and making decisions on what, you know, at least from Funkhaus' standpoint, what their component guidelines are, right? So there's some decisions that also needs to be made.
Yeah,
I do
mean,
think there's a
I
lot
think
that you can. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, John, please.
I was gonna say, I think there's a lot that you can get for free just from a good like development setup, like good linting and
Yep.
auto fixing, so
That's
that
a great
Right.
idea.
on save
Yeah.
it will just fix stuff for you.
Yeah.
And then I think there's probably some baseline unit tests that you could probably write. Like you want the root element of a component to have a class that's the same as the
Right.
component name. Like just
Right.
write a unit test
Yeah,
for that
yeah,
and like
yeah.
make sure it runs on everything. And
Correct.
like, you know, what any other kind of like code smells that are just must meet all these requirements. You know, that's in a way it's like from the product request side, you're writing you can be writing like the test driven development, like you can write the tests, and then you know the dev environment is your like storybook driven development for the whoever the developer is, they can write it there.
Right.
And as long as they're
Right.
hitting all the hitting all your unit tests, they know that they're at least on the
Right.
right track of what
Right.
they actually want.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you make a good point, and I think what I heard really is like the long-term goal of it is that all these things are as automated as much as possible. So there's like little to none manual intervention that must be done. Like, I mean, the documentation and someone reading it is like one thing, but like if they didn't do it, you know, our code base should give them immediate feedback as fast as possible when they do something wrong.
Yeah, and one thing so I worked for an agency about 4 years ago, and one of the things I focused on was trying to like get people to follow style guidelines. And what I learned is it doesn't work unless you automate it for them. Like it just doesn't work, especially when you're all working on different projects, different code
Right.
bases.
Right.
If you're trying to like organizationally enforce something, then you need to automate that, or no one will follow it.
Yeah.
I like the linting idea, John. I think that the whole component should be built by the linter. Just give it a name, and upon save, it automatically creates the component for you.
Yeah.
The other
some like scaffolding tools would be nice too. You're right.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea.
Oh.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, because you asked the question earlier on about people knowing the workflow of Git and GitHub specifically, you know, on top of that, is that I think a lot of people use Git and they think they know GitHub,
Right.
but you know, again, people know how to push and pull their own branches, etc. And I mean, look, Git is its whole its whole own wormhole of like just. It can get super crazy how much you could or couldn't know about Git. So I think this is great from a starting place, but it's definitely one of those things that are you creating an artificial gating mechanism that people who might be solid developers who just aren't familiar with GitHub's workflow.
Exactly.
That you're blocking them out. But again, that doesn't mean you should have done this first. You do this first, and by the way, like it's also a you know, again, maybe it's a good gating mechanism, especially in the beginning, that you want people who are competent enough at least to know that before you start opening it up for everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. Like this was definitely a concern that we had, but you know, ultimately what it came down into is like, you know, with the least amount of effort, if you know, we had to choose a standard that I think would hit the most amount of people potentially, right? If we were going to do this as fast as possible, and you know, the other options are like try to do it in Bitbucket or GitLab or start writing our own thing. And I think GitHub today is probably the best choice.
Much bigger
out of
ecosystem
those.
For sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think my initial plan was to like literally extrapolate, you know, as many of these things out as possible. So like even from a, you know, an agency or a company standpoint, they also don't even need to know GitHub, right? They just need to know how to make a component request. You know, that's what I would love to get to eventually. I don't know when and how I will get there, but you know, my vision was that like a lot of these things are, you know, redone from a UI perspective, you know, specifically for the purposes of, you know, building a UI kit and having flows specific to that. So I mean, definitely there's a project to be done. And, you know, anyone interested, please come talk to me and or Drew. And you know, we're talking about this idea right now to see how and when we're going to decide to take this to the next level. So if you're interested, let us know.
Very cool. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of interesting stuff here you could share. I mean, everyone has access. We're all on Slack, so you know, everyone has access to both these projects, both these talks, and kind of just see. It seems like, you know, everyone's kind of open to contributors. So for both these, if anybody doesn't have access to the Slack, you can it's at Vue.jsla.com. You can get an invite. Yeah.
And if I may close out by saying, you know, if you work at a company that has some kind of UI element, you know, push for it to be open source, and you know, maybe you can, you know, contribute to the component factory and take advantage of it, and get work done by outside people from the open source community. That's all.
Cool. Nice. Any other questions for James? Anybody thoughts? All right.
Cool.
James, thank you for presenting. Everyone, unmute yourselves for a sec so we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, James.
Thank you.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we're pretty much at 8 o'clock on the nose. Let's first of all, there were two excellent talks today. I think we all learned a lot, and it's really cool to see two things that are kind of in the prototype idea stage, but that aren't in the I'm fantasizing about stuff stage. Like, it's actually like, this is like real prototyping. This is stuff that people have not just thought about, which a lot of us, you know, a lot of people have ideas, but you're like really watching people execute, who are top developers building things like legit in a short period of time. And this is like what prototyping is all about. So that's really, really cool. So I don't know. I just find it fascinating to see both these, like, both really, really cool projects by super strong developers who know what they're doing and how quickly they can knock out new ideas and try them out, and iterate on them. So that's really, really cool. Before we go, I will remind everyone we are on every month, and then I'm already about to answer my own question potentially, but if we have any potential talk, anybody want to give a talk for next month, please email. But I do see a UI kit in there. That'd be pretty damn cool to walk through and see how it got built. So John, James, and either one of you guys feel like sharing that next time around, let me know. And
should be John.
John, I don't want to put you on the spot. We can DM about it later. But anyway, but yeah,
I'm cooking, but yeah, we can talk.
all right, yeah, if anybody else has any talks in them, would love to see them. Yeah, it was a great session. Anybody else?
I would say that if anybody's interested in me doing like a deeper dive in anything that I talked about today, I'm happy to do that. If it feels like enough people are interested, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we already spent a little bit a good amount of time on the multi-tenancy stuff on already, but you've just spent so much time thinking about it that like maybe there's like a mini talk in there too of just like how you think about multi-tenancy. That's pretty cool. Nice. All right, team. Good session, everyone. Thank you again.
Give it up for Kobe, who always organizes, right?
Thank you.
Grab a beer, Kobe. It's been a while.
I've got a keg under my desk right now.
I'll go grab a beer.
in COVID, I think that's what we replaced my chair with. I just like I'm constantly tapped in. Anyway, but guys, really fun session. Everyone, thank you for contributing. And yeah, I guess we'll see you guys all next month.
All right. Thank
All
you
right.
again.
Good job hosting. Good job, speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great
Thanks
talks,
so
guys.
much.
Thank you both so much. Awesome. Beautiful work. Thank you all. Good night, man.